How many dates do you give a guy if you're just not sure you're into him?
13 and a half.
No, stop.
We're Jackie and Bobby Angel, and we're answering your questions that you asked for Instagram here for Focus.
How much of a factor does physical attraction really contribute to dating? Okay, some people are like, love is a choice, so just marry whoever. That's terrible advice. People, you have to make love to this person a lot, okay? Yes, love is a choice, but you also have to be attracted to the person, okay? We are not in arranged marriages. Sorry, I get very passionate because people say these things, and I'm like, yes, you need both. You need that love is a choice, but you also need to be attracted to the person.
There's got to be some level of chemistry,
Yeah.
I would say.
I mean, till death do you part is a long time.
That being said, our bodies fade. So it cannot be solely physical.
That's why you need friendship as well.
Yeah, there's got to be a deep love and care for the person, which grows over time. That really, again, it just recognizes like our beauty runs much deeper than just the outside.
And attraction, this is the other thing, is attraction is not just the physical appearance. I actually think holiness is one of the most attractive things. For me, like my husband, the fact that he's humble and funny, that was so attractive. It's like, yeah, you're good looking.
Funny looking.
Yeah. I know a lot of good looking guys, and some of them, just because of who they are, it's kind of like, ugh. But a holy person is so attractive. So attractiveness is not just outward appearance, because that will fade. So you need to be attracted, and there needs to be romance. So you need to have both a friendship and a romance, and attraction is the whole person. So just so we know that, because they said physical attraction, but I think physical attraction, someone is more physically attractive when they are a good human being, when they're humble, when they're fun, when they can laugh at themselves, when they have virtue. That is very attractive. Catholic male says we are just friends, but wants to make out. Should I be concerned? Yes, you should be concerned. No. If this guy likes you, he should ask you out. But this is like a perfect example of, we're just friends. I just want to use you. Like, I don't actually have any intention of marrying you. I just kind of want to use you for pleasure. I mean, this is like a perfect example of I just want to use you. And we can also use each other emotionally and use each other as placeholders until we find our boyfriend or girlfriend or our husband or wife. I know I have done it. I have treated guy friends like they were my placeholders until I found my husband. Like the way we would text, the way we would talk, I'm like, if I had a boyfriend right now, like the question I had to ask was like, if I had a boyfriend right now, would I be texting this guy like this? Would I be doing this? No. And so for this person, this girl asking this question, if you had a boyfriend, would you be making out with your guy friend? No, you wouldn't. So have some respect for yourself. And yes, you should be concerned and be like, heck no. Like, no, I'm not going to let you use me, and I'm not going to use you.
Message for the men. Just because a person is consenting, it does not make it right. Just because like a person has set a bar low for themselves or has low self-worth or self-esteem, or like, it does not give us as men permission to use anyone. And John Paul II even talked about being stewards of the feminine, like upholding the dignity of the other person, even if they don't recognize it themselves. Like it's that look of love that is, again, requires self-control, requires purification of our own hearts, which is what Christ is calling us to do. And the bar is high, but the bar of grace poured out is also abundant for our transformation of our heads and our hearts and our memories, so that we can look upon any woman in front of us, any person, and say, you have inherent dignity. And I'm aware there's a fallen part of me that wants to use. And yet asking the Lord to purify that, and so that I can affirm the dignity of this person, whether or not they see it in themselves. And that's the call for all of us.
Yeah, and truthfully, before my conversion, it was like, oh yeah, sure, I'll use you and you use me. And Pope John Paul calls that mutual prostitution. But that, I feel like before we really know our dignity and worth, we're okay with using people and letting them use us. And when you realize your dignity and worth, you won't let that happen anymore. As for the guys who are like, how do I get a girlfriend? You need to ask girls on dates. That's the first step.
Say what?
I know, right? Like, ask girls on dates. Go to Catholic events. Ask a girl on a date. Don't say hang out. Be like, can I take you on a date? I would like to get to know you better. And a date is just getting to know someone better. It's not like you have to marry this person at the first date. In fact, I recommend you go on a couple dates, and after about 3 dates, you realize, I really like this person. Like, I really like being with them. Then maybe you could be like, hey, I think, be more exclusive, boyfriend and girlfriend. and you discern as you go. But the first step is to ask someone on a date. And a girl asked, can I ask a guy on a date?
My answer
I would love to know what you would say.
I would love to know too. My answer is yes, ... Ideally, I think the man should be the initiator, but I think as a man, we're also a little obtuse
Sometimes.
and oblivious to the fact that there may be mutual attraction. And I know for like for us, I thought it was one-sided at first, and then I realized, oh, she likes me too, and then it was...
Because you got to drop the hanky, ladies. That's what they used to do. They would drop the hanky, and the
Yeah.
guy would be like, oh, this is a sign, like, I like you.
Right.
Hint, hint, ask me on a date. So
'Cause-
it's called dropping the hanky.
Yeah, because men, we may be terrified. We just may be beaten down by a culture that says men should not be initiators and shouldn't. You know, it's aggressive to do that, but I mean, sometimes it takes, showing in a little more obvious way, I am interested.
So you can ask a guy on a date. The hope would be that you would drop the hanky enough to let them know you're interested, and they would ask you on the date.
Where he still feels like I initiated when she's like, actually I did, but...
How many dates do you give a guy if you're just not sure you're into him?
13 and a half.
No, stop. That's not true. I would go on a date with a guy and be like, if I was already thinking like, who could I set this guy up with? Like, that's probably a pretty clear sign, like, we probably shouldn't go on more dates. Because
Not that that's ever happened.
not that this is totally hypothetical. But if I was thinking that, because I obviously went on dates with just good guys, and they were good Catholic guys, but if they weren't for me, I was like, who should I set them up with? They're a really good guy. So if a guy asked me on another date, I think one of the guys, I was like, okay, I'll go on a second date, just, to make sure. But if they said, can I take you on another date, I had a guy friend who told me to say, like, you just need to say no, and you need to say, like, thank you, but I won't be going on any further dates with you. And it's hard to hear, but it's much better than being led on, right? It's much better than being ghosted. So it's like a Band-Aid being ripped off. It's hard to be rejected. It's hard for someone to say no. But I had a guy when he said, could I take you on another date? And I said, I had a great, thank you so much, but I won't be going on any further dates. And he's like, is there anything I did wrong? I was like, no, you're a perfect gentleman. But again, I was like thinking, who could I set him up with? And he ended up marrying a friend of mine. It was perfect. But just be clear, I would go on a date, and then maybe if you feel like I could go on a second date, but I feel like you know pretty quickly, like, do we click? Like, do I like being with this person? Is this like I am with my best friends? Like, am I able just to be myself? Is it pretty natural? Like, it's not forced. So I think you do kind of know within a date or two, and definitely 3 dates.
And if you're on the receiving end of this, it's not fun.
No,
Like,
it's never fun to be broken up with or...
Yeah, to be rejected, but to also recognize the respect the person is showing you in being upfront with you, instead of ghosting or kicking the can down the road and just like toying with each other's emotions. Don't throw a hissy fit if you are on that receiving end of we're not going to go on any further dates, because they're trying to show you respect. And yes, it can hurt like hell, but to also, you can process that and recognize too that we all deserve in a way that person who's like into us, not someone that's just kind of, I'm settling for you. Like, to have someone that's on fire, like, I cannot wait to start life with you.
Yeah, I didn't want to be married to a guy who just was like, oh, sure, I'll go on another date with you. It's like, no, I want a guy who's in love with me. Like, we deserve someone who loves you just as much as you love them. Okay. So if they're not into you, then you don't want to marry that person. You don't want to force love. You can't force love. You can't make someone love you.
It's that cheesy line of rejection is God's protection.
Amen, that's right. Okay.
It's not true just because it rhymes, but there is a level.
But it is true.
Yeah, there's a level of truth to that.
Yeah, there was a guy who broke up with me, and I was so devastated, but I was like, thank God he did. Thank God. Because later came this, so grateful.
It hurts in the moment.
It does.
Take it to prayer. Take it to the Lord of the universe, who sees you and knows you and loves you no matter what. And that's what we're really aiming for at the end of the day, because it's so easy to make the romantic relationships an idol. I'll be happy when I get this girlfriend. I'll be happy when I get married. And it's like, no. This is an icon. This is a sign of God's love for us. And so that's the love that satisfies at the end of the day.
Okay, how do you know your partner is the one? I always say, like, when you meet the person that God is calling you to marry, you feel there's a sense of like, you feel safe to be yourself. Like you feel, for some people, home is not a great analogy, but for some people, like home is that place of safety. Some people it's not. But you finally feel like, I feel free to be myself. I don't have to pretend anymore to be someone else. Like there were some relationships where I felt like, oh, they're like, Jackie, you're too Catholic or you're too goofy. And finally, when I met Bobby, it was like, he loved all of me. And I didn't have to be anybody else. I could just be me. And he loved that about me. And so my favorite definition of like kind of like when you find the one you're called to marry is that it's friendship with romance. So when you have that beautiful balance of like, this is your best friend, the person you can just be yourself with, like you can with your friends of the same sex, your girlfriends, your guy friends, like you don't have to pretend to be someone. So when you find that in someone of the opposite sex and they love you for you, your friend, you have a friendship and you have a virtuous friendship, which means you have a common goal, which is heaven. And then you have that romance and you're like, wow, I'm really attracted to you. That's like the beautiful balance of having both of those. So that's how I knew Bobby was one. There was this beautiful friendship, but I also was like, wow, you're very handsome and I really like you. What are tips on things to keep relationships chaste? So, I mean, you're probably not going to do what I do. Like on the first date, I'm like, how Catholic are you? And I'm trying to figure that out.
Can we reverse and just define what do we mean by chastity?
Yes, yeah, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Chastity means the successful integration of our desires, of our body, of our soul, so that we're not at war within ourselves. It's I have self-control, I have self-possession, so that I can love freely. It's not about I'm just being directed by my desires left and right, my feelings, and those are there, desires and feelings, and they're good. They're indicators of something. But chastity is the integration and the self-control of putting that towards the good of the other person.
Yeah, and learning to love someone and not use them.
It's a lifelong journey.
Yeah.
It's not a one and done. Like it is constant. Like we're called to chastity in marriage. Like religious, single, everyone is called to chastity.
Every baptized person is called to chastity, which means holiness, purity of heart, mind, body, and soul, learning to love someone and not use them. Yeah, and to not let your feelings and emotions drive you, and you're not a slave to your emotions, but actually you have dominion over your emotions and that you allow to love your will to run the show, kind of. So like I want to will the good of my spouse. And even when we were dating, it's like, I want the best for you. And so obviously in marriage, chastity looks different than when you're single. It says in the catechism, in marriage, chastity is part of conjugal love. So obviously we're able to make love. When you are single, you're called to continence, which means you are not supposed to be having sex or actually any action, sexual activity that is leading to sex. And those are acts of arousal. So a priest once defined it like this: are acts of affection and acts of arousal. I thought that was a really good distinction because when you aren't married, you can show signs of affection, whether that's holding hands, a hug. There we go. And when you're married, those things are supposed to lead to a husband and wife becoming one flesh. These, not just affection, but acts of arousal. So that's reserved for marriage. So when you are single, how do you live a life of chastity? Well, if you are dating, you have to have boundaries and you have to be able to talk with the person about it. My thing is, if you can't talk to the person you're dating about boundaries and chastity, you're probably not called to marry them. Like if you can't even talk about something like that, you probably shouldn't marry this person. Because when we were dating, it was like, okay, what can we do to help each other? Because I'm very attracted to you. I want to pounce, I was. But how can we help each other to heaven? So we had to be like, all right, around 11 o'clock, you need to go home. Like you need to go because at this point, it's not going to be good. We probably should keep our feet on the floor because if we're laying down on the couch together, probably not the best thing. That's going to be a temptation for sure. And then even there were times it's like, okay, a kiss, that's nice. Making out, that's starting the train for sure of arousal. Like this is really difficult to hear because our culture doesn't think anything is wrong with any of this stuff. They don't think sex is a big deal. They think all this stuff is no big deal, even on your first date. So what we're saying is you are called to holiness, and we are called to love every person we meet. People ask the question like, how far is too far? But it's not about that. It's how can we help get each other to heaven? And truthfully, every person you date is somebody else's future spouse, or they could be a priest or a nun. And so think about that too. I'm called to help love this person and guard this person, protect this person, and sometimes from me. So how can I help this person get to heaven and sometimes prepare them for their future vocation, which isn't me? So boundaries, you have to have boundaries, but also ask the tough questions of, what am I seeking from this person? Do I desire to use them for my pleasure physically or emotionally, or do I long to love them? We have to look at the motives of our heart, and sometimes that's not an easy question to ask.
The Catechism says that chastity is a long and exacting work. So be patient with yourself, and thanks be to God, we have confession to go over and over again as often as we fall.
Bobby, how do you advise dating when also feeling the call to religious life?
Oh dear.
I know you've had to deal with this with some students. You worked at an all-boys Catholic high school.
Well, and I discerned the priesthood for some years in my 20s too. I think it's important to know how deep is the magnet on your heart. Like, is it a passing question of priesthood or religious life, and you're kind of checking it out, versus I'm feeling it pretty deep, and now I need to go and answer this question. At that point, I would say there has to be heroic self-control to say, I need to go and figure this out. And for me, that was the case. I realized I'm going to be an old man, now that I am. I'm going to be an old man and wonder, what if I don't go and answer this priest question? And years of discernment, eventually 3 years of seminary formation before I felt the confirmation it is towards the married life. So to recognize, how deep are you feeling pulled by the Lord towards a vocation to priesthood or religious life, the consecrated life? Because then it really is, we're playing with our hearts, we're playing with someone else's hearts to try to date and do both, and to just say, I need to have self-control, not be flirting, not be putting out mixed signals to other people, and go and give that to the Lord. And you're not going to miss out. Here's the thing too, is like, God will, nothing is wasted. So those years of seminary formation made me into a better husband and father.
I'm grateful. He had to take a class on active listening. And as a husband, I think every husband should have to take that class. I am so grateful for those years of formation that he had. Again, if you are discerning that, I discerned being a nun, and I was like, Lord, where do you want me? But if you go into the convent, if you go into the seminary, it's not going to be wasted time. You're going to be formed and grow in holiness for whatever vocation God has for you. Someone else asked, what advice would you give to those who date non-Catholic? Somebody else asked about, is it bad to date someone who's not Catholic? Here's the question I always want to pose, and it's like the person you get married to. Because sometimes we think that when we get married, it's just about us and our chemistry and falling in love, but we don't think about our kids. The question I would ask to you is, if you died, would this person be able to help your children get to heaven? And if they're an atheist and they don't even believe in heaven, that's a problem. Okay, so if they're not Catholic, my question would be, are they open to the Catholic faith? Are they seeking truth? Because as Catholics, we're not afraid that if someone seeks truth, they're not going to find the Catholic faith. We know they're going to find the Catholic faith if they follow truth all the way to the end. So are they open to seeking the truth? Are they humble? Are they willing to learn about Catholicism with you? So my thing is, it's not that you can't date non-Catholics. Obviously, I'm like you. They probably should believe in Jesus. It's good to have Christ as a foundation. That's a sacramental marriage, is when you are both baptized. But are we running this race together? Because again, marriage is about helping each other get to heaven, but not just each other, your children. So when we date, the purpose of dating is to find your future spouse. So I'm a big proponent of, don't waste your time on someone who could care less about your soul. Like, don't waste your time in that kind of dating scenario. And a lot of you guys asked about dating and like, how do I get a girlfriend? How, the dating pool seems slim and it's pretty rough out there right now. You guys, listen, it is rough out there. We've heard the stories. The dating pool, and especially if you're looking for someone who is Catholic, it is such a small number in the world. So my advice would be, you're probably not going to find the person. You might be high school sweethearts. You're probably not going to find the person in the city you live in. Like, my husband was across the country. We have a friend, her husband was across the world. And we actually know couples that their spouses, they had to meet on Catholic Match. So you have to open, wide the funnel. The funnel has to be pretty big. Like, you can't just look in your city. You might have to look across the country. You might have to look across the world for the person, because more and more people are nothing. They're not religious. They don't care about God. And so the funnel of where you have to look has to be wider. All right, most men today are struggling with porn. As women, how do we judge when to back away?
We're in a pornified culture. It's kind of, we're all the walking wounded, and to be aware of just that common hurt and exposure we're all carrying. And what's important is that a man is making headway. It's not enough to just excuse the habit. It's, what are you really doing about it? Are you showing success? Are you showing you've sought out accountability? You've sought out different software. You are making steps and going deep, like getting to the roots of, like, for a lot of us, it was 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 when we first saw this stuff. So it's a long time pacifier. That's not an excuse. It's just understanding this is can be a habit, can be an addiction, and it's a process to get rid of it. But there does need to be some sense of, I am really taking it seriously. And with God's grace, freedom is absolutely possible. I've seen it in my own life.
I agree. Yeah. Is there such a thing as too fast?
Yes. Sonic the Hedgehog. Oh my gosh. Way too fast. Needs to slow down.
Actually, I would say one thing as human beings, we struggle, like struggle bus right here. It's like we dive, especially people who are like the romantic at heart, we dive way too fast. And I know I've done it into, like, we go on a first date. We're like, oh my gosh, I want to marry you. And then a few dates later, we're like, oh, yeah, I got to know you and like that was disappointing. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of times we are not very good at
pacing ourselves.
Yeah, pacing ourselves and even guarding our hearts. So that takes practice. That takes time of learning how to be a little detached. Not detached in like no emotions.
Or not caring,
but detached in, like, when I was dating Bobby, I was like, okay, I'm 99% sure that this is the man I'm gonna marry, but there's like a 1% chance, like, he could die. Like, what if this isn't the man I'm gonna marry?
I will die.
You will die at some point. But, you know, like, I was like pretty, like, there could be a chance that this person couldn't be the one I'm gonna marry. So, like, I still have to guard this person and love him and protect him. And we still have to live a life of chastity. We're dating and we were engaged. But I was like, there still could be a chance.
Yeah, because you're not married until you're married.
That's right.
And John Paul II even wrote about this. There's an excitedness that we have when we get those first flames of love. And we want to go all in, and we want to be up till 3 a.m. talking to this person, pouring out everything. And there's a trial and error here too. And thank God for his mercy and recognizing that it's not about, like, just kind of putting up artificial walls. It's just recognizing, like, let it grow organically. Let love grow in its time. And sometimes there's that grasp, like there's that human grasping for, I see the good in this thing and I really want it to be so, and I have to go all in now or I'm going to lose it. But that's a posture of fear. That's a posture of, I don't really trust God at some level. So I need to snag this for myself before it's gone, instead of, if it's the one, if this person is the one, if this is God where you want me, I'm going to let it breathe. I'm going to slow down and let it blossom in its time.
So, good rules for dating. There's a documentary called The Dating Project, and it's really good. Go watch it. But it just has some good rules for dating. Ask someone on a date. When you go on dates, they should be less than an hour. Go ask them to coffee. It should cost $15, you know. And there should be no physical. It's just getting to know someone, going on a date. And you could be going on dates with other people because there is no physical, right? Like, you're just getting to know somebody.
And there's no exclusivity.
Yes.
Right at the get-go.
But after a couple dates, if you realize, like, wow, I really love being with this person, I want this time to go longer, then there can be an exclusivity and say, hey, I would, love to be your girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever it is, and ask in that exclusivity, and then you're discerning at that point marriage. But those first couple dates, it's just really getting to know someone. So how fast is too fast? It's like when you start putting the physical before the emotional, like, you're not going at the same rate.
Well, and you're not thinking clearly either.
Yeah, because it can definitely, the further you go physically, it can definitely blind you to the reality of the person. And your spiritual director, when you fell in love with me, he said, make sure you love the reality more than the romance. Because some of us are just in love with love. And we like being in love. We love the feeling of love. But the beautiful thing is when you meet this person, it's like, as I got to know Bobby, the more I got to know him, it wasn't like with other guys, I was really disappointed as I got to know them. Like, oh, I had this idea of you and I was in love with this idea of you. And as I got to know you, I was like, ugh. But with Bobby, the more I got to know him, I was like, oh, wow, I love you even more. And even when we would get into arguments and we would make up and forgive one another, it was like, wow, I love you even more. So make sure you're in love with the reality more than the romance. So you got to kind of pull it back a little bit on the emotional train and even the physical to make sure that you love the reality of the person and not just the feelings you have when you're with this person. And sometimes you'll have both, which is great. How can you make sure God is the center of your relationship? What are things we can do?
Bingo.
Oh my gosh, fish fries.
The pancake breakfast. Those are great.
Those are fantastic.
It sounds too obvious, but praying together. And yet it's something that I think because the devil hates so much and we don't always have that modeling of parents who prayed together or families that prayed together, it can be very clunky. Like, how do we pray together? Or sometimes we've built up a routine of prayer individually. So bringing that together, which I'd still say you still need your individual prayer. Yeah. But then how are we praying together? And so are we, that can start out small, just informal prayer from the heart together, closing the day in prayer over the phone or in person, going to mass together, serving together. I think it's beautiful when it's not just a reception of the sacraments together, but also let's be the hands and feet of Christ. Let's serve in whatever capacity where we feel called to do. Like Jackie and I came out of youth ministry, and so we've always loved giving back to youth and college students and to also witness to that. Like, here's a couple that actually likes being around each other, and that is possible. And I had that. I had married couple core members growing up in my youth ministry program that showed me, like, you can be married and serve God together. It's not you're married and you disappear and you emerge from a cave 30 years later maybe to help at the fish fry. It's like we're in it together. We're giving our time and our marriage to the Lord.
Yeah, so it's communication too. Like, we had to have this talk of how do you like praying separately? And then how can we pray together? So, because we know we like our own devotions and sometimes we like them privately. Like, I privately like praying the rosary by myself more than I do with a group, although I will do it with a group and with my family and our kids. But I do like to take more time and to meditate. And so we found our ways, and that takes communication and talking with each other, asking each other, like, what do you like doing separately and what do you like doing together? Bobby, what advice would you give to an engaged couple that is getting married this year? Congratulations, by the way. That's exciting.
Finish the race.
Yeah.
It will end. Engagement is tough because especially if you are trying to do it with the Lord, you're trying to stay chaste, you're not living together. If you're trying to do everything in the church, like the high bar of the church for love, it's tiring because it's the stress of the wedding logistics and what's life going to look like. And sometimes, I mean, we felt it. Like, can we just run away and get married and get it? Like, it's a continued time of discernment. So keep asking the hard questions when it comes to, like, the family background and how we handled conflict. What is our attitude towards finances? Are we ready for kids right away? This is a time to ask those hard questions and also have the hope that the finish line is coming, however far away it seems.